Thank you very much, and welcome back for the next 2 hours. I'm going to continue with further indications of intervention by evil sources, evil forces, to establish a one world order through the New World Order. I'd like to mention, to begin with, that there is a device, it's a bean, that it can be reduced. You can peel the outer layer off of it, the castor bean, and you can breathe it, eat it, or put it on your skin, and it will induce a heart attack that's not traceable. This is being used by the CIA, according to my sources, and the bean is deadly even without any preparation, either eaten or powdered and inhaled, or through an open wound, or through your membranes. The rice itself is much more, and through the eyes and the nose. This is sold as a novelty only. This is a pamphlet that I have. It tells about how to make this poison. Of course, I don't ever intend to use it myself, but I just thought I might mention to you some of the devices that are being used by this evil element that's permeated into our society, throughout our society. There's some other matters that are being taken care of by our adversaries, and again, this is from one of my sources, and this is called the Videodrome signal. It's operating about 6 cycles away from the harmonic of the nation's power lines, and specifically phase modulated to the exact frequency of all U.S. TV networks. This powerful and sinister mind control and behavioral modification signal is beamed to override all television programming 24 hours per day, and in a subliminal fashion, bypassing the conscious mind into the TV viewer's living room. This is all coordinated by the National Bureau of Standards in Boulder, Colorado, where the military's master computer is housed, by the way. For complete details of what the Videodrome signal ultimately does to those people most sensitive to it, see the movie Videodrome. It's based on science fiction fact, but it is not science fiction. The Videodrome signals is subliminal via video, UHF, VHF TV, and usually consists of ideas and scenes of violence, sexual perversion, fear, guilt, or grief. It is stage 1 of preconditioning. These are purposely projected for electronic mind control, EMC, and programming of the masses for the ultimate purpose of slavery. Some more information from one of my sources. Project Grayvan, a super-secret plan initiated in 1991 to forcibly eliminate all Americans and other individuals who have been determined to be active opponents of the New World Order. Military personnel, highly trained in quick combat techniques such as SWAT team tactics, will be sanctioned to enter into a town or a city and, using computer listings, locate those who are classed as dissidents to the New World Order, and to exterminate these people quickly and be gone within an hour or so, moving from city to city in such a manner as to not leave much trace for local law authorities to follow. The plan is to claim these people eliminated were involved in drug dealings and that it was merely part of a drug war, and to keep the information out of the news media. I might start the second half by stating and by pointing out that among the many problems we have is the organized child kidnapping ring that's operating not only in Nebraska, but also in Washington, D.C. And I'll start with the Finders case. This is not an official document cover. This is something that one of my technicians put together. But the Finders case began on February 5th, 1987. And on that occasion, the Tallahassee Police Department received a phone call And the phone call, the caller stated that there were two men, well-dressed men, and 6 young children who were in the park in Tallahassee. And this anonymous phone call, you see it there, 2 well-dressed men wearing suits. The police proceeded to the location. They found these 2 men there near a 1980 blue Dodge bearing Virginia license so-and-so, the inside of which was later described as foul-smelling, filled with maps, books, letters, with a mattress situated in the rear of the van which appeared as if it were used as a bed. The overall appearance of the van gave the impression that all 8 persons were living in it. The children were covered with insect bites, were very dirty. Most of the children were not wearing underwear, and all the children had not been bathed in many days. The men were arrested and charged with multiple counts of child abuse and lodged in the Leon County Jail. Once in custody, the men were somewhat evasive in their answers to the police regarding the children and stated only that they both were the children's teachers and that all were en route to Mexico to establish a school for brilliant children. The children tentatively were identified as Mary Houlihan, white female, age 7, Max Livingston, and white male, age 6, and so on. The next child, age 4, the next child, age 3, the next child, age 2, and age 2, obviously related to Mary. The children initially indicated that they lived in tents in a commune in the Washington, D.C. area and were going to Mexico to go to a school for smart kids. The office contacted, this is the customs agent, by the way, this is the report of investigation, Department of the Treasury, this is an official report that was given to me. This office, the customs agent, who's a good guy, okay, contacted the office of the RAC D.C., that's District of Columbia, and spoke with agent so-and-so Bob Harold. This agent requested telephone numbers and names of police persons in area departments that might be aware of said activities described by the children and to follow up on the leads, which were the Virginia license number and a check of the men's names with local law enforcement. And the report goes on, and it says that the 2 adults were well-dressed, white males. They had custody of 6 children. And it goes on and continues, describes the van. And the police, upon interviewing the children, the officers found that they could not adequately identify themselves or their custodians. Further, they stated that they were en route to Mexico to attend a school for smart kids. And Agent Keitlow was further advised that the children were unaware of the functions and the purpose of telephones, television, and toilets, and that the children had stated they were not allowed to live indoors and were only given food as a reward. This continues with the report. They were, this office, the customs agent, was contacted by Jim Bradley with the Metropolitan Police Department and related to a case that currently is working in the Washington, D.C. area. He said the actions of the 2 men in custody relative to the children just might give his case enough probable cause to search for search warrants to search premises occupied by cult groups called the Finders. The Finders. This agent directed Bradley to telephone Tallahassee Police Department and discuss with the police directly any activities forthcoming relative to the case. At this time, it was determined that there was no customs violations found to exist, and therefore this case is being closed, pending receipt of additional information, and so forth. This is the identifiable data and the inquiry that was made concerning the 2 men arrested and the Finders group. The report goes on. After receiving the request from Tallahassee Police, requested I conduct computer checks on the Custom Child Pornography Unit database. The checks were to be conducted in the names, addresses, and vehicles provided. After conducting the computer checks, I made direct contact with Agent so-and-so and informed him that all the checks were negative. At that time, I was informed that the Tallahassee Police had discovered large quantities of records to include computer disks and a U.S. passport in the van. From some of these records, the police had obtained tentative identification of the 2 adults and partial identification of the children. Furthermore, The 2 Washington, D.C. addresses had been discovered through these documents, one of which was verified through the vehicle registration. I advised Agent so-and-so I was leaving headquarters and he would be receiving a response to the remainder of his request from Agent so-and-so. I then left the state as stated and proceeded to conduct further business in the district. A short time later, at approximately 11:30 a.m., Agent Harold contacted me by radio and advised me that a Detective Bradley, Metropolitan Police, Washington, D.C., was interested in the information provided by Kreitlow, was in contact with Tallahassee and would very probably be conducting search warrants in the area later in the day. He also informed me that U.S. Customs was invited to participate due to the continuing possibility of violations of law enforcement by the Customs Service. As I was already in Washington, I terminated my other business and proceeded to make contact with Detective Bradley of the Metropolitan Police Department. Upon contacting Detective Bradley, learned that he had initiated an investigation on the 2 addresses provided by the Tallahassee Police during December of '86. An informant had given him information regarding a cult known as the Finders, operating various businesses out of a warehouse located at 1307 4th Street Northeast, and were supposed to be housing children at 3918 and 3920 W Street Northwest. The information was specific in describing blood rituals and sex orgies involving children, and an as-yet unsolved murder in which the Finders may be involved. With the information provided by the informant, Detective Bradley was able to match some of the children in Tallahassee with names of children alleged to be in the custody of the Finders. Further, Bradley was able to match the tentative ID of the adults with known members of the Finders. I stood by while Bradley consulted with U.S. Attorney Benner and obtained search warrants for the 2 premises. I advised Acting Agent Holloran of my intention to accompany the Metropolitan Police Department on the execution of the warrants. Received his permission and was joined by so-and-so. During the execution of the warrants at 3918 and 20 W Street, I was able to observe and access the entire building. I saw large quantities of children's clothing and toys. The clothing consisted of diapers and clothes in the toddler to preschool range. No children were found on the premises. There were several subjects on the premises. Only one was deemed to be connected with the Finders. The rest were renting living space from this individual. He was identified as Stuart Miles Silverstone, so-and-so, passport number so-and-so. He was located in a room occupied with several computers, printers, and numerous documents. Cursory examination of the documents revealed detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. The instructions included the impregnation of female members of the community known as Finders, purchasing children, trading, and kidnapping. There were telex messages using MCI account numbers between a computer terminal believed to be located in the same room and others located across the country and in foreign locations. One such telex specifically ordered, pardon me, thank you, one such telex specifically ordered the purchase of 2 children in Hong Kong to be arranged through a contact in the Chinese embassy there. Another telex expressed an interest in bank secrecy situations. Other documents identified interest in high-tech transfers to the United Kingdom, numerous properties under the control of the Finders, a keen interest in terrorism, explosives, and the evasion of law enforcement. Also found in the computer room was a detailed summary of the events surrounding the arrest and taking into custody the 2 adults and 6 children in Tallahassee, Florida on the previous night. There were also a set of instructions which appeared to be broadcast via a computer network which advised participants to move the children and keep them moving through different jurisdictions and instructions on how to avoid police attention. That would indicate to me they had other children in the location, and after they were apprehended, they figured it might lead back to this location, and so they moved children out of there. One of the residents was identified as a Chinese national. Due to the telex discovered referencing the Chinese embassy in Hong Kong, he was fully identified for future reference. And it goes on. He is in the U.S. as a graduate student. During the course of the evening, I contacted Sector 4 to initiate a text check on Silverstone and initiate an archives check for him of the last 4 years. I was also contacted by Agent so-and-so to keep him advised of the proceedings and ask for and receive permission to contact so-and-so of the so-and-so. Let's see. I later contacted Sullivan for the above statement. I gave him background on the purpose of the request. I advised him that the information was not for dissemination headquarters. The region was being notified. And that region probably contact headquarters later as deemed necessary. There were, during the search warrant, there were extremely large quantities of documents and computer equipment at the warehouse. The Metropolitan Police was posting officers inside the building. They were sealing the building until morning, in which a second warrant for that premise would be obtained and executed. Agent Harrell also advised me that the news media had been notified and had been waiting for execution of the warrant on the 4th Street address. Did anybody remember reading about this in the newspapers? Okay. You're going to find out that this is news. This is major news. And I'll tell you at on the last page. Talking about controlling the press, ladies and gentlemen, believe me. That the news media had been notified. Detective Bradley later stated that the Metropolitan Police Department information officer had been contacted. I guess is out. When it became apparent there was no information on the search warrant, the reporter contacted local news media. There it is. For the search warrants, disclosed the location and purpose of the warrant. Detective Bradley surmised that someone in the Tallahassee Police Department was the original source of information for the press. And it goes on. Now, I met Detective Bradley at the warehouse, granted limited access to the premises. I was able to observe numerous documents which described explicit sexual conduct between the members of the community known as the Finders. I also saw a large collection of photographs of unidentified persons. Some of the photographs were nudes believed to be members of the Finders. There were numerous photos of children, some nude, at least one of which was a photo of a child on display and appearing to accent the child's genitals. I was also able to examine a very small amount of the photographs at this time. However, one of the officers presented me with a photo album for my review. The album contained a series of photos of adults and children dressed in white sheets participating in a blood ritual. The ritual centered around the execution of at least 2 goats. The photos portrayed the execution, disembowelment, skinning, and dismemberment of the goats at the hands of the children. This included the removal of the testes of the male goat, the discovery of a female goat's womb, and the baby goats inside the womb, and the presentation of a goat's head to one of the children. By the way, we're going to see later on, I'm going to show you a drawing of a totem pole that's used in satanic ceremonies. This drawing will be by a 6-year-old child. That's one of the highest levels of Satanism. So it's very apparent here from this goat, using the goat, that this is probably a high level for Satanism. There's various levels involved in Satanism. Further inspection of the premises disclosed numerous files relating to activities of the organization in different parts of the world. Locations I observed are as follows: London, Germany, the Bahamas, Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Africa, Costa Rica, and Europe. There was also a file identified as Palestinian. Other files were identified by member name or project name. The project appearing to be operated for commercial purposes under front names for the Finders. There was one file entitled Pentagon Break-In, and others which referred to members operating in foreign countries. Not observed by me, but related by the Metropolitan Police Department, were intelligence files on private families not related to the Finders. That means they're gathering information on people not involved with the Finders. I have been told by Satanists that if a pedophile or a practicing Satanist wants a blue-eyed, blonde-haired child, they can actually give an order out, and they will get 5 or 6 pictures of a blue-eyed, blonde-haired child, and they'll pick out the child they want, and then they go kidnap that child. The process undertaken appears to have been a systematic response to a local newspaper advertisement for babysitters, tutors, etc. A member of the Finders would respond and gather as much information as possible about the habits, identity, occupation, etc. of the family. The use to which this information was to be put is still unknown. There was also a large amount of data collected on various child care organizations. We're going to talk about child care organizations later on. We're going to talk about the McMartin case, a famous case out of Manhattan Beach, California. The warehouse contained a large library, 2 kitchens, sauna, hot tub, and a video room. The video room seems to be set up as an indoctrination center. It also appeared that the organization had the capability to produce its own videos. There were what appeared to be training areas for children and what appeared to be an altar set up in a residential area of the warehouse. Many jars of urine and feces were located in the area. I should also mention that both premises were equipped with satellite dish antennas. I discussed the course of action to be taken by the Metropolitan Police Department. Detective Bradley stated he was only interested in making the child abuse cases. I was assured that all of the evidence would be available to the U.S. Customs for furtherance of any investigative criminal action pursued. Metropolitan Police personnel were to begin around-the-clock review and sorting of the evidence until completed. The Customs will have access after this is accomplished. This will include several U.S. passports discovered during the search. Upon leaving the 4th Street premises, I encountered a news media representative and was asked the reason behind U.S. Customs' involvement in the investigation. I advised the reporter that I could not discuss anything and referred her to RACDC. I left immediately thereafter. There is no further information available at this time. It should take 3 to 5 days for all the information to be sorted, reviewed, logged by the Metropolitan Police. I will maintain contact with Detective Bradley until the evidence is again accessible. Again, we're still talking about an official report, U.S. government. It's right up there. On Thursday, February 5th, Senior Agent Harold and I assisted the Washington Metropolitan Police Department with 2 search warrants involving the possible sexual exploitation of children. During the course of the search warrants, numerous documents were discovered which appeared to be concerned with international trafficking in children, high-tech transfers to the United Kingdom, and international transfer of currency. On March 31, 1987, I contacted James Bradley of the Washington Metropolitan Police Department. I was to meet with Bradley to review the documents seized pursuant to 2 search warrants executed in February 87. The meeting was to take place April 2nd or 3rd, 1987. Read this next 3 paragraphs close, 4 paragraphs. On April 2nd, 1987, I arrived at the Metropolitan Police Department at approximately 9 a.m. Detective Bradley was not available. I spoke with a third party who was willing to discuss the case with me on a strictly off-the-record basis. I was advised that all the passport data had been turned over to the State Department for their investigation. The State Department, in turn, advised the Metropolitan Police that all travel and use of the passports by the holders of the passports was within the law and no action would be taken. This included travel to Moscow, North Korea, and North Vietnam from the late 1950s to the mid-1970s. Weren't we at war during that period with these people? And I think travel was forbidden in those days, right? When you're at war with a country. This individual further advised me of circumstances which indicated that the investigation into the activity of the finders, watch this, look at this, had become a CIA internal matter. The Metropolitan Police report has been classified secret and was not available for review. I was advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation several weeks prior and that the FBI Foreign Counterintelligence Division, that's headquarters, by the way, had directed the Metropolitan Police Department not to advise FBI Washington Field Office, that's the field division in Washington, D.C., of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available. No further action will be taken. That tells you a little bit about the finders, I believe. And I have a confidential informant report that has obviously been misplaced, and we will find it here in just a minute. And again, this is information from a confidential source. The finders. A CIA front formed during the 1960s. It has top clearance and protection in its assigned task of kidnapping and torture programming young children across the United States. Its specially trained government kidnappers are known to be sexual degenerates who involve the children in satanic sex orgies and bloody rituals, as well as the murders of other children and the slaughter of animals. The Finders uses a fleet of unmarked vans to grab targeted children from parks and schoolyards. They then drug the children and transport them to a series of safe houses for special training. Marion David, I don't need to mention his last name, the leader of the Finders cult, he is an identified homosexual pedophile and a CIA officer whose son was an employee of the CIA proprietary firm Air America, which was notorious for its smuggling of drugs out of the Golden Triangle into Saigon during the Vietnam War, destined for the United States. Do I have a picture of this fellow? I don't have one with me, okay? Now, let me just mention one other thing. I've already talked about the Nebraska case, and I urge all of you to get a copy of the Franklin Cover-Up book by John DeCamp. It's out of print, but he did give me permission to make copies, photocopies of it, and make it available to you. During this investigation, which I mentioned in the first 2 hours, it was learned, and I was told personally by Paul Benassi and others, that in Nebraska, this evil element, these people were taking children out of private schools, and they were using them as decoys. They used Paul Benassi particularly as decoys. These are kids that are trained, by the way. And Paul himself personally told me how it was done. And when he was 10, 11, 12 years old, he now is 28, 29 years old. When he was 10, 11, 12 years old, he would go out with the adults and attract, and as a decoy, bring the children in shopping malls or parks over near the car, or cars, or the vans. And when they get close, the adults would grab the kids and make off with them. They'd use 2 vans or 2 automobiles, because that way, if there was a witness, they'd be confused as to what the license number was. Paul told me that these kids were then kept in safe houses, the same information that my informant has here. It's a separate informant, by the way. By the way, Paul is a born-again Christian, and that's why one of the reasons I'm sure he's been talking and furnishing information. He's not furnishing everything. He's been used some discretion, obviously, because there have been attempts on his life. But Paul told me that these kids would be kept in safe houses across the country, taken to Las Vegas or Toronto, Canada, in some instances, not every instance, and auctioned off at both of those locations. He told me he had attended 6 such auctions in Las Vegas, and as few as 6, as many as 36 children were there. A blue-eyed, blonde-haired child will sell for $50,000. So $50,000 times 36 is a pretty substantial amount of money. I personally became incensed, of course, as I'm sure you are, that this is going on in our country, and the law enforcement is doing virtually nothing about it. Worse than that, they're covering it up. And I wrote letters. I've got the letters in volume 3 of this file, this Corruption, Satanic Cult, Drug Network, and Missing Children. I wrote letters to the Honorable Don Stenberg, Attorney General of the State of Nebraska, with a copy to Ben Nelson, the governor. I wrote a letter to the FBI. I wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the United States. And I told them, you don't have to take my word for it. I mean, just come call me. And I will give you the names of my informants and my sources. You interview the children yourself, and you decide whether there's any credibility here. You decide if there's an investigation that's necessary. And I received 2 responses, and they're in this volume also. One response said, your sources are not credible, and of course they don't know who my sources are. And the other one said, there's no documentation. Steinberg wrote back and said, you don't have adequate documentation. I wrote him back immediately. I gave him the documentation. It's in this same report, by the way, and I have not heard from him since. As far as the FBI is concerned, I never received a response from them. I did receive a response from the Attorney General's office, a nebulous response. It's in there also. So, you know, the FBI and the Department of Justice, they can tell you how many bank robberies occurred last year. They can tell you how many aggravated assaults, how many statutory rapes, but they cannot tell you how many children disappear every year. Nobody knows for sure how many people disappear every year. They can actually tell you, the FBI can, in homicide cases, how many children boys or girls killed mother, how many boys or girls killed father, how many husbands killed wives, and so forth. But they can't tell us how many children disappear every year. This is a national disgrace, absolutely national disgrace. And I contend, right here and now, that this is by design. They don't want to know. They don't want the American people to know how many children disappear every year. Actually, there are, according to the Reader's Digest, there are 100,000 children disappear every year. But the number of children who are missing is really not known for sure. The number of total missing individuals in this country is estimated up to close to 2 million, but most of those people do return. But this situation with the missing children, the children that are being auctioned off, Paul told me the story about he flew on a plane from Omaha to Los Angeles with some of these people. There was a young boy on there. The young boy cried the whole way out to Los Angeles, young child. Paul never saw him come back to Nebraska, doesn't know what happened to him. Paul has told me about snuff films that he was involved in, where he went into a cage where they hold the Bilderberger, not the Bilderberger, but the Bohemian Grove meetings in Northern California. And he's talked about satanic ceremonies in front of the owl at the Bohemian Grove. And in fact, in the Franklin cover-up book, there's a story in there about one of the snuff films he participated in. He lived because he was part of the network, part of their network. Fortunately, as I said, he's a born-again Christian now. Also, Paul told me about on a number of occasions he would be given a ticket, airline ticket, fly to Los Angeles as a child. He would meet a man and a woman he'd never seen before, and there would be 5 passports for 5 different names, and he and this couple would fly off and drop drugs all over the world. He also talked about a customs agent that was dirty in the LAX area, Los Angeles area. So the story goes on and on and on. By the way, Paul, under the direction of John DeCamp, filed lawsuits against all the people that were involved that have been identified. This included former past publisher of the Omaha World-Herald, Harold Anderson, Bob Wadman, former chief of police, Eugene Mahoney, and others. And John DeCamp told me, all we need is the videotapes. That's the smoking gun in this case. And back when the case initially broke, the police raided the home of one of the participants, found 90 videotapes. The tapes were kept in the custody of the Omaha Police Department for a considerable period of time. When John DeCamp put pressure on the police department to come forth with the tapes, they were taken out of there and secretly taken into the court system. They were taken into the state court. The state court said it was a federal matter. It was a jurisdiction of the federal government. The state court then referred it to the federal government. The federal government eventually said, I think they may have referred it back. I'm not sure whether, in the end, either the state or the federal government had custody of it. But the long and the short of it is that initially these participants, these people that were involved in this ring, said there were no tapes. And then when they found out there were tapes, they said, well, there's nothing on the tapes that would be incriminating, yet the tapes had never been made public. And then when they found out that they were going into the court system with the tapes, they appealed to the court that they not be made public, to be kept in the custody of the court because they would destroy the reputation of reputable individuals. So as I say, that's the Nebraska case. It ties into the Finders case out of Washington, D.C. There's more than adequate documentation. There's documentation on the Franklin cover-up book that's available, as I mentioned to you earlier. And there's additional information that would be available, and it is available as we go along. Now, you see there, if you will notice, that is iced tea from last night. That's where I spilled it in my lecture. Okay. Let's go and let's talk about we're going to talk some more later on. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City bombing. Okay? Now, let me tell you something, folks. Before George Bush left office, the anti-terrorism bill was written. One of the authors, who was a Department of Justice attorney at the time and is now a practicing attorney in Washington, D.C., made the statement publicly that before this bill will be passed, people will have to be killed. Okay, now along comes not the Oklahoma City bombing, but the World Trade Center bombing. And this is an article in the New York Times. It also appeared, the similar information appeared in the Los Angeles Times, October 28, 1993. And this article talks about Ahmad A. Salem, or Salem, who is an informer for the FBI. Mr. Salem, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer, was used by the government to penetrate a circle of Muslim extremists now charged in 2 bombing cases, the World Trade Center attack and a foiled ploy to destroy the United Nations, the Hudson River tunnels, and other New York City landmarks. He was a crucial witness in the second bombing case, but his work for the government was erratic, and for months before the Trade Center blast, he was feuding with the FBI. After the bombing, he resumed his undercover work in an undated transcript of a conversation from that period. Mr. Salem recounts a talk he had earlier with agents about an unnamed FBI supervisor who he said came and messed it up. He requested to meet me in the hotel, Mr. Salem says of the supervisor. He requested to make me to testify, and he didn't push for that. We'll be building the bomb with a phony powder and grabbing the people who will be involved in it. But since you, and that continues over on page, he didn't do that. Well, it looks like I left out part of the page. The transcript quotes Mr. Salem as saying that he wanted to complain to FBI and headquarters in Washington, D.C. about the Bureau's failure to stop the bombing, but was dissuaded by an agent identified as John Antisev, I guess. He said he didn't think that the New York people would like this thing. To make a long story short, ladies and gentlemen, over here, another point in the transcript, Mr. Salem recounts a conversation he said he had with Mr. Antisev, saying, guys, now you saw this bomb went off, and you both know that we could avoid that. At another point, Mr. Salem says, you get paid, you get guys, to prevent problems like this from happening. To make a long story short, this man was an FBI handler, FBI informant. His FBI handler, in a conversation with him, he recorded his conversation with the FBI handler. This documents that the FBI knew in advance they were going to bomb the World Trade Center. Bombing did not prevent it from happening. 6 people killed, $500,000 in damage, over 1,000 people injured. If I was a congressman or senator in Washington, D.C., and I knew that the FBI could have prevented a bombing, any bombing, I would be stomping up and down on my desk, and I would ask for an immediate investigation. I personally handled a bombing conspiracy in Los Angeles when I was the senior special agent in charge there. We had the Weather Underground that planned to bomb a state senator's office. We planted our informants in the group. Our informants were actually FBI undercover agents. And we went right up to the morning of the bombing before we arrested them and tried them for conspiracy. But that brings me now up to the present time, or I should say a year ago, last April the 19th. I'm in my living room, relaxing. I'm watching the television, and the bombing occurred. And I watched the TV news, and they were saying it was an ammonium nitrate bomb. And then I received a fax, and according to this fax was from the University of Oklahoma Geology Department, and it was a survey, University of Oklahoma. According to this fax, the seismogram, there were 2 detonations, one there and one there. That, by the way, I talked to Dr. Brown at the University of Oklahoma. That was a train went by just before this, so that doesn't count right there. But they said that very clearly there was an explosion or detonation or groundswell, 9:02 and 3 seconds, and again 10 seconds later, 9:02 and 13 seconds. And I'll give you a larger view of that. Now there's an enlargement of it. That's the train there. Here's the first one. That's the second one. I called a friend of mine. Unfortunately, he's in jail. He was, I have friends in jail. He was a CIA agent in his day, and he was going to testify against the government on the Inslaw case. And he calls me 2, 3, 4 times a week, by the way. And he was warned before he was going to sign an affidavit on the Inslaw case, if you sign that affidavit, you will go to jail. 6 weeks after he signed the affidavit, he was arrested, and he's now serving 30 years first offense for manufacturing drugs. For your information, the story on the Inslaw case, just one of many. This was a computer system developed by a fellow named Bill Hamilton, and it involved what is called the PROMIS software. This tied the whole network, law enforcement, the courts, the locals, and the federals together in one big network. And Bill Hamilton developed it, called it the Inslaw, or the PROMIS software, sold it, leased it to the Department of Justice for 3 years. At the end of 2 years, the Department of Justice refused to pay him. He went into bankruptcy court, filed a lawsuit, won the lawsuit in bankruptcy court, spent several $1 million winning the lawsuit. And the case was appealed by the government, and the courts came out, the appellate court came back and said, you have to go into another court. You're in the wrong court, fellow. You start all over again. And so he's in the position now where he's bankrupt. And what happened to the computer system? It was sold by it was given by the Department of Justice to a man named Earl Bryant. He used to be head of the UPI, United Press International. Earl Bryant had raised millions of dollars for Ronald Reagan. It was a political payoff. Bryant then turned around and sold it back to the Department of Justice, I understand, in the area of $10 million. It was then sold to the Israelis and to the Canadians with the trapdoor in it, which meant that we were able to retrieve any information that they developed on it. Anyway, Michael had worked on it as a CIA agent to refine it, and he was going to testify for Bill Hamilton in that regard. That gives you a little background on Michael. By the way, there's extensive intelligence information about Michael in my bombing report. Talks about some of his past activities. His family owned the Hercules manufacturing company out of the Silicon Valley, and Michael is very intelligent. Probably one of the brightest men I've ever known. Anyway, Michael calls me, and I tell him, hey, Michael, there's 2 detonations, not one, and the government says this is an ammonium nitrate fertilizer bomb. Michael says, not possible. And he said, that's my bomb. Well, what he's talking about there is the ammonium nitrate, not the ammonia, the electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. This shows you some of the damage, by the way. Now, ammonium nitrate bomb, or a fertilizer bomb, disperses 360 degrees, evenly, or unevenly, really. It also lets off gases, and immediately after the bombing, people would not have been able to go into the building without gas masks. And but people went in there immediately, and they did not have gas masks on. This shows the damage to the building. Look at this, and half a moon there, and then comes back out. This was a directional bomb. There have been several theories on. General Pardon had a theory that somebody wrapped the pillars down below. Galen Windsor said it was a neutron bomb, and so forth. We don't know for sure what it was. We think it was the electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, a combination of that and ammonium nitrate. Because we do know for a fact, we're pretty sure that they bought at least 4,000 pounds worth of fertilizer, McVeigh and Nichols. Of course, they haven't been convicted yet, so we can't say that they are guilty. We have to be very careful with that. But you can see from this that the vast amount of damage was right in this area. Now, ammonium nitrate bomb is not going to leave that much damage. It's going to be basically even all over. So here's some more damage. So this is the version of our bomb. An abstract describing the operation of the electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device. When this bomb was tested by the U.S. government, it's a highly classified bomb. General Pardon, by the way, a very competent, wonderful man, capable man. He doesn't think that this bomb exists, but this bomb was developed after he left the service in the early 80s, 82. When it was tested, 2 technicians died. It was so powerful they had no idea it was as powerful as it was. And this is a technical explanation of it. This explanation is in the bombing report, the Oklahoma City bombing report. Now, the way our bomb works, this barometric bomb works, is there are releases of 2 fuels, 2 gases, chemicals. The number 1 is a white chemical, the number 2 is a dark chemical. I talked to survivors on the 7th and 8th floor, and I said, describe time-wise what you heard. And both of them, and they didn't know each other, they weren't in each other's presence when they told me this, both of them said, we heard boom, boom, with the second boom louder than the first. Boom, boom. This bomb of ours, this barometric bomb, the first boom releases white chemical cloud, and it blows out the windows and goes into the building. And then the second release releases a dark chemical cloud, and when they meet and get together, and when they marry, so to speak, the blast is unbelievable. Now, in the first instance where the white chemical cloud is released, if it does not surround the whole pillar, like 360 degrees pillar, it will not destroy the pillar. It has to completely encompass it. That day there were 40-mile-an-hour gusts of winds, by the way. Some of the pillars in the front were not destroyed. There was a lamp with a street lamp that was not destroyed, but was parked near the truck. So what we're saying is this was a directional bomb that has the signature of our bomb. Here you see, right here, is a pillar. First explosive force, the white chemical cloud would surround it, followed by the dark chemical cloud, which would totally disintegrate it. I talked to a man who was on the recovery crew. He was from Phoenix. He was one of the first ones over on the scene. Well, first one, I'd say, within 9 or 10 hours after it occurred. And he told me he'd never seen anything like it. He'd been to bombings before. He said you needed a wheelbarrow and a shovel, and they carried the debris out in buckets because it was like sawdust, which, again, is the signature of our bomb. This shows you the first blast. It opens up like a flower, followed by the second blast. Now, I talked to a state assemblyman who was looking out the 5th floor of the state capitol building, and he told me that he's heard the blast, and he looked and he saw a white chemical cloud rise 150 feet above the building, followed by a dark chemical cloud. There was a lady interviewed on CNN who said that she saw everything white, and then all of a sudden everything was dark. And it's based on these circumstances that we feel that it was the electrohydrodynamic gaseous fuel device, the barometric bomb. That's an indication of it. We changed our thinking from this initial bomb to a combination of this plus the ammonium nitrate bomb. And we have the contract number for this bomb, the government contract number. We've written and asked for the contract, copy of the contract. And do you think that we received a response? No, of course not. We know that this bomb was, according to our information, manufactured by Dyna Nobel out of Salt Lake City, Utah. It blows out windows across the street. Now, there was some destruction in this one building across the street, and it did collapse, but it was an old building, but it was nothing like this, nothing like this. By the way, on the seismogram, the University of Oklahoma, I called them and confirmed that their records were accurate, and they told me that within the first 2 days, I called them on April the 26th, by the way. They told me that within the first 2 days, by the 21st of April, 4 members of the media had been in there and obtained this information that there were 2 ground swells or 2 detonations, including ABC television. Yet, nobody reported it. Now, if you think back to the pictures that you saw, the men went in. There was a bomb scare the first day. I've been told that there was a bomb, another bomb inside, that it was taken out on a stretcher as if it was an injured person and taken out to a military base and detonated. Now, if our bomb went boom, boom, what about the bomb that was 10 seconds later, right? 9:03 and 9:02 and 3 seconds, and then 9:02 and 13 seconds, right? Well, what we think was our bomb was the initial blast, boom, boom, and by the way, it was milliseconds apart, so fast that it wouldn't show up as two blasts on the seismogram. Our bomb, we feel, was the first groundswell, combination of both of them, boom, boom, and then the one 10 seconds later we think was possibly an illegally stored bomb by the federal ATF. That morning at 7:30. The Oklahoma City Police Department bomb squad was parked across the street from the federal building. After the bomb exploded, a lady who worked in the building but was not there that day was standing next to an ATF agent and asked him, and knew he was an ATF agent, asked him, where were you when the bomb exploded? And he said, well, we had a bomb scare. We were told we did not have to come to work today. There were no ATF agents killed. There were some DEA agents killed, and there were some Secret Service agents killed. In fact, there was a Secret Service agent who had just been reassigned from the White House to Oklahoma City who was killed in the blast. The ATF claims that their people were out working on an all-night surveillance. And also, by the way, one of the ATF agents claimed that he was on the 8th floor and dropped to the 5th floor in the elevator. And the elevator experts have come in, and we have documentation that that elevator has safety devices in it that prevent it from dropping from floor to floor and out of control like that. So it's very obvious that this man was not telling the truth. The FBI housed in other facilities away from the federal building. The morning of the 18th now, this is the day before, two of my employees had to go to the Veterans Administration Hospital in Las Vegas. They came back, and after the Veterans Administration Hospital, they went to the Selective Service building, and they had some business there. They came back afterwards, and both of them said, you know, something's going to happen. Something's wrong, because I've never seen armed guards at the Veterans Hospital, and I've never seen armed guards at the Social Security office. And sure enough, the next day, it did happen, as we know. So what did happen? Well, based on everything that we've been able to piece together, and I feel that we're really right on. And I might also mention that the Washington, D.C. editor of the London Telegraph has come out publicly and backs my theory on the bomb, our theory on the bomb, the barometric bomb. And I might also mention that an investigator at the scene who has fed us information confidentially has told us it was a dual charge, which is the boom boom, has also told us that McVeigh was supposed to have been vaporized with the blast. He didn't go up with the blast, as we know. So what happened? Well, McVeigh was in Special Forces. The government says that he did not meet their standards, and he was washed out of Special Forces. Notice I said the government says. And then he was sent to Fort Hays, Kansas, and given a discharge at Fort Hays, Kansas. He was demonstrating against the government on the, not Ruby Ridge, but the Waco situation, and was an outspoken critic of the government. And on the Saturday before the 19th, he went to the Junction City Body Shop, which rents Ryder trucks, and reserved a 20-foot truck, not a 24-foot truck, as the government claims. And the difference between a 20-foot truck and a 24-foot truck, and I personally went out to Ryder truck and checked it out, is that the 20-foot truck has a side door on the panel, on the passenger side. And it's a door that opens up. The 24-foot truck does not have a door that opens up. John Doe 2 was identified with McVeigh that day by 3 witnesses. That was on Saturday. Monday, they picked up the automobile, the van. Tuesday, the van was seen at a lake outside Junction City, Kansas, parked all day, on and off by various witnesses, with next to a pickup truck that appeared to be a truck similar to Larry Nichols, who's also been charged with the bombing. McVeigh was also identified, and also John Doe 2, at the Dreamland Motel in Junction City, Kansas. And it's been reported that McVeigh and John Doe 2 have been identified together in Kingman, Arizona. That's information that came from a confidential source. So early the morning of the 19th, they left the Junction City, Kansas motel, the Dreamland Motel, proceeded to Oklahoma City. They were early. We theorized they wanted to be there precisely at 9 o'clock because that's the maximum number of casualties. At 8:25, they pulled into a Firestone parking lot, sat there until 8:35. The attendant at the lot has identified McVeigh as the driver and has also identified the passenger as John Doe 2. They then proceeded to the Federal Building. We feel this bomb, by the way, has to be detonated. We feel that McVeigh dropped off John Doe 2 a block from the Federal Building. Then he drove in behind a UPS truck, parked the truck, got out, went around, opened the side door. The bomb is a directional bomb. You remember the damage in the building I showed you a few moments ago? It's a directional bomb. You point it in a direction and you lock it, and it's unbelievably destructive. Then McVeigh had time to get away because John Doe 2 was having difficulty with his detonator. It just didn't go off right. At 9 o'clock it wouldn't go off, and it took him until 9:02 and 3 seconds to detonate the bomb. McVeigh, I'm sure, was not aware that he was supposed to be a stool pigeon, a patsy, a pawn in the game. And he went over behind the YMCA in the alley, got in his van, and drove off. He was apprehended some 90 minutes later. In the meantime, the bomb was exploded, and John Doe 2 obviously got away. Now, here's a picture of John Doe 2. I'm sure you've seen this before many times. And let's talk about John Doe 2. This is an article that appeared May the 10th, 1995, LA Times. If it wasn't such a serious problem, you know, this would be very laughable. But let's read this article, parts of it, not the whole article. We're talking about John Doe 2. Meantime, the government says John Doe 2 doesn't exist, right? First they said he existed, and they said, oh, that was a GI that was in there a day or two after McVeigh was there. And people became confused. He doesn't exist. Folks, just forget about John Doe 2. He's not there. Why is the government saying this? The government is saying this because this bomb is too sophisticated. McVeigh did not have the capability or the knowledge or the experience to put a bomb of this sophistication together. It takes a circuit board to detonate it with the detonator. Now, if the government, if it comes out and it's made public that McVeigh put this bomb together, that means he had to have a lot of special training, and it doesn't back him up. His training does not back him up. So therefore, what we're talking about is people beyond McVeigh and beyond Nichols who are involved in this bombing. Let's talk about John Doe 2. Read this. Let's read this together. Investigators, meantime, began to fear that they were given a false lead in the description of the long-sought suspect known as John Doe No. 2, who was said to have accompanied McVeigh to the Junction City, Kansas Ryder truck rental franchise on April 17th to rent the vehicle allegedly used in the bombing. Some are even advancing the theory that John Doe 2 was Nichols, who bears little resemblance to the FBI's composite drawing of the suspect, or possibly even Nichols' son, who appears to be as tall as 5'7" and weigh as much as 170 pounds. That's Joshua Nichols, by the way, and I've interviewed him. He doesn't even look like John Doe 2, by the way. One source close to the case said that if John Doe 2 turns out to be Joshua Nichols, the likelihood that he had an innocuous role, but that he could be helpful as a witness in the case. Another source close to the investigation said doubts also are increasing over whether the man who accompanied McVeigh to the Ryder truck rental agency was the same individual that a witness reported seeing with McVeigh as they sped away from downtown Oklahoma City on the morning of the bombing. Investigators had thought that the same person was with McVeigh in both places. The investigators said authorities think that John Doe 2 could be two people and that different men could have accompanied McVeigh to serve as decoys and confuse investigators trying to trace his movements. He said officials also fear that the descriptions and the composite drawing of the second suspect not only may have resulted from a misdirection, but have also cost them valuable investigative time in the early stages of the manhunt. Describing what kind of uncertainty in the early days of the investigation, the source said, what happens is they went off in misdirection. They were looking for a real muscular guy who was tan, and that was false. So here they were chasing down this false lead, several false leads. It's got to be a very small conspiracy, he added, because with a big conspiracy, you can't keep this under wraps. They're right there. They're not going to keep it under wraps either. Under the assumption, he said, investigators have a theory that James Nichols was the brains behind how the bombing scheme would work. Terry Nichols was the expert in building the explosive, and McVeigh was the man who would carry out the plot. McVeigh was not smart enough to build this, the source said. He's a soldier. He's the guy who takes it, parks it, lights it, blows it up. But obviously there's going to be somebody with him to transfer him out of there, to take him out of there. That accomplice, the alleged John Doe 2, could also be someone still unknown to federal investigators. It could be a real loner or a drifter, the source says. I mean, isn't that ridiculous? If you followed the newspaper articles from the beginning to the end and you followed TV, you notice that the government officials who were making the releases made a number of contradictory statements. One statement, 5 statements down the line from the first statement, would contradict that. And I asked a friend of mine, I said, why in the world, how could an intelligent man keep making these same mistakes? And his answer, well, that's cocaine thinking. I mean, think about it, you know. I can't say that the people who planned this bombing were on cocaine, but I certainly, if you've had anything to do, any dealings with drugs, you know that they don't think clear, they don't think straight. But so what happened is John Doe 2, he got away. He does exist, there's no question about it. There's a TV station, NBC affiliate in Oklahoma City, claims to have identified him. He's supposed to be a repatriated Iraqi soldier, and he's filed a lawsuit against the station in Oklahoma City, claiming he isn't John Doe 2. There's been extensive investigation conducted by numerous individuals. As I said, the editor of the London Telegraph supports me and supports us on our theory on the bomb itself. The government on NBC Dateline, obviously the government released and worked with NBC Dateline on a report that they put together. I don't know if you saw it or not. But they pointed out that the case was solved through 18 months of telephone calls that were made on a Liberty Lobby calling card. I saw the article in the paper, the release of the information about the Liberty Lobby calling card. In the first instance, the government came out and said McVeigh is not talking. Next, the Anti-Defamation League came out and said that they were able to trace McVeigh because he bought a Liberty Lobby calling card, and they traced those calls. Now, the truth is, and they also said that he had a Liberty Lobby calling card in his possession at the time he was arrested by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol. When he was arrested by the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, according to a source of mine in the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, he did not have a Liberty Lobby calling card on him. He purchased a Liberty Lobby calling card using a fictitious name. He purchased, he registered at the hotel, the Dreamland Hotel, under another fictitious name. He memorized the Liberty Lobby calling card telephone number. I happen to know this from James Nichols, Larry Nichols' brother. And the only way somebody could have known about the Liberty Lobby calling card would be if they were traveling with him and moving in his circles. So somebody in his circles had to tell the government about the Liberty Lobby calling card, the number, etc., for them to get their hands on it. As I said, there were like 700 different phone calls that were made off of the Liberty Lobby calling card. Okay, so why is this evil element in our society, in our government, whatever? By the way, let me just make it very clear. There's a lot of good people working in the government. I'm not going to say the whole government's rotten. There's a lot of good ones in there. I know some. Unfortunately, they've been strategically, this evil element strategically placed in key positions, and there's no question about it, in my opinion, this is what's happened. And if you don't believe me, as I said earlier in the first 2 hours, check out this book, The Elite, Who's Who in the Elite. It tells you who some of these people are. But here's what my theory is, and I think I'm right. I know I'm right. I'm confident I'm right. The anti-terrorism legislation was written before George Bush left office. They needed an incident in order to have it passed. They had the Oklahoma City, the World Trade Center bombing. There weren't enough people killed, apparently. It wasn't passed. And then we had the Oklahoma City bombing. I have contended all along, and I was on CNN last Sunday, by the way, that this was an incident that was created in order to hasten the passage of the anti-terrorism legislation that would further take away our constitutional rights and our civil liberties. I don't think there's any question about it. We've seen the signs. Also, as you recall, right after the bombing, President Clinton came out and said, oh, the militia did this, right? And he blamed the talk show hosts because they were putting out the word. They were getting the word to the public. And then and the militia started organizing. There was a survey, I understand, and there were the results came out. There were 10 million people that were sympathetic to the militia. And then what did Bill Clinton do? He came out and he said, oops, wait a minute, the militia didn't do this after all. I can imagine he was thinking, how am I going to control 10 million people? I would guess. I don't know. This was some of the proposed, oh, excuse me, this is not the Terrorism Act. To further back up what I'm telling you, that there is a government cover-up, this is an article that appeared again in the Spotlight, October 30, 1995. McVeigh's lawyer claims bombing cover-up. The jury has revealed the indictments were fatal flaw. This is Hoppy Heidelberg. One member of the federal grand jury handed down the indictment, has spoken out against the grand jury proceedings. The juror has revealed the indictments were fatally flawed and federal prosecutors withheld vital information from the grand jurors impaneled to hear testimony. As a result, Stephen Jones, Richard Burr, lawyers representing McVeigh, have filed a motion seeking dismissal of the indictments. Grand jury is particularly upset that prosecutors stifled the panel from asking questions about the bombing investigation, and particularly about the so-called John Doe No. 2, who has never been located and whom federal investigators now contend never existed. The government made a deliberate attempt to cause the grand jury to focus only upon an indictment on Nichols and McVeigh and purposely did not bring to the grand jury evidence which would establish the role of others or a larger conspiracy, Jones said in his motion to dismiss the indictment against McVeigh. The grand juror has stated prosecutors did not seem interested in pursuing leads concerning John Doe No. 2 and did not want members of the panel asking questions about him. The grand juror further stated he is satisfied that the government knows the identity of the mysterious man linked to the case since a few days after the actual bombing. And the article goes on. And basically what he's saying is that John Doe 2 does exist and that the government is covering up. Now, as a representative, as an investigator working with John DeCamp, John DeCamp was, again, in the scene. This man gets around, believe me. He is Hoppy Heidelberg's attorney. And John asked me to go interview Hoppy Heidelberg. And so I do have attorney-client privilege. I cannot discuss what he told me, but I can say that he gave me this information plus much more. So I do have a considerable amount of information that cannot be publicly released at this time. This is some of the legislation that was proposed right after the bombing, and some of it's passed, some of it hasn't. Establish a domestic counterterrorism center headed by the FBI. Increased authority to search phone logs, hotels, motels. Federal Crime International Terrorism Committee committed within the United States punishable by death. Expand federal wiretaps and surveillance powers. They're all over the place now. I don't know why they want to expand them. They have a bill's been passed that gives them indiscriminate authority to tap whole neighborhoods at a time. They don't have to have probable cause. Forbids fundraising by organizations the president designates as terrorists. Understand that the new terrorist bill that finally did pass, I do not have a copy of it as yet, but that there's a problem with raising money if you criticize the government. There's certain situations where you can be arrested for criticizing the government. I'm sorry, I apologize for not having the details here right today. Continuing permits evidence from secret sources to be used in deportation proceedings. Now, I think that fairly well covers the Oklahoma City bombing. The bottom line, of course, is that there are people in the government that have much more information than they are revealing to the American public. And furthermore, they are covering this up. Now, I might mention, I've been asked what's the time frame on the takeover. I've talked to sources about this, meaning the takeover, meaning martial law or whatever you want to call it. I don't know that there will ever be a martial law that will be issued by the president, but I'm very much concerned because everything points in that direction, as I've pretty well documented tonight. I've been told that he could issue orders for martial law as early as December, and maybe even this coming spring, meaning next spring, 1997. I might also mention that when we had the break after the first 2 hours, someone came up and gave me these little playing cards, and it's captioned the Illuminati, the New World Order, Unlimited Edition, a booster stack, and has a pyramid with an eye on it, and it's cards for children on the inside. Here you are right here. Cards for children to read, and we're talking again about indoctrination. I was also asked on the break about Ron Brown. The wreckage from the plane was on the other side of the mountain. It was also in the water. Committed suicide. Shot in the chest. Yes. And I don't think, by the way, I was also told that there was a CIA advisor on the plane who for the last 5 years was a member of a five-man team. He was a six-member, actually, six-man team that keeps the president advised on a daily basis of intelligence activity around the world. And in the first 2 hours, I forgot to mention that it's been passed. The line item veto has been passed by the Congress and by the president. Now can do line item veto and veto any information out of the bill at the end of 5 days without any checks or balances. Then it becomes a law. One more step toward totalitarian government. Now I'd like to kind of move into another direction. Let's go in and talk about Satanism. I mean, after all, that's part of this whole overall operation. Illuminati, Satanism, drugs, they all overlap. They're like hand in glove. And the person I'm going to concentrate on is a fellow named Aleister Crowley. He liked to be called Holy, or Crowley because it rhymed with holy, but his real name is Aleister Crowley. He was born in 1875, and as I recall, he died, I think, in 1947. And he died in a walk-up flat. He had been a heroin addict, and his last words were, "I am perplexed." He was raised a Christian at Cambridge University. He came to the United States in 1898, joined the Order of the Golden Dawn in Los Angeles, organized chapters of the Oro Templi Orientis, which is satanic in nature, in Los Angeles in 1905. He wrote a number of books in his philosophy, claims to have never been an active member of satanic activity, but his philosophy and his words and his beliefs live on, and they are being used by the satanic movement in this country today. The Process Church was organized, which is also actively and considered a satanic group, 1963 in the United States. Charles Manson was a member of the Process Church, as I recall. Manson was also a member of the Church of Scientology. The Church of Satan was organized in 1973 by Anton LaVey, and the Church of Set, a split from the Church of Satan, was organized by Michael Aquino in 1975. Michael Aquino is a retired colonel in the military and has been identified by children who were at the Presidio Officers Club as an abuser of these children. They told their mother about it. There was an 18-month investigation by the Army as a result of these children identifying him at the Officers Club on that occasion. And, of course, he was acquitted. There was actually no indictments, and nothing ever came of it. During this investigation, he was transferred to St. Louis, Missouri, where he was in charge of the military records for the Army Reserve and the National Guard. And then subsequently he was discharged. The last I heard, he was working on a highly classified research project at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Based on my information and research of the last 16, 17 years, there are 3 million plus practicing Satanists in this country. This is based on information from 3 different sources. A source in the South Bay area, Los Angeles, population 200,000, claims that there are 3,000 practicing Satanists there. Another source, Iowa City, Iowa, 100,000 people, population, about 1,500 practicing Satanists in Iowa City, Iowa. Lincoln, Nebraska, another source, claims that there are a town of 200,000, there's about 3,000 practicing Satanists. If you project this figure throughout the United States, it's 1.5% roughly, or a little under 4 million, but to be conservative, I say 3 million practicing members in the country today. 3 different sources, a preacher, a minister, a prison chaplain has told me he estimates between 50 and 60,000 human sacrifices. 2 other inmates have estimated 50 to 60,000 human sacrifices by the Satanic Church and people who are practicing Satanism. They are actively involved in Project Monarch, which is CIA mind control, initially named MK Ultra. So let's start with Aleister Crowley. We'll start with his book, Magic in Theory and Practice. This is page 92, and it starts out, of the bloody sacrifice. And then we talk about the blood is the life. And then here's what he says on page 94. It would be unwise to condemn as irrational the practice of those savages who tear the heart and liver from an adversary and devour them while yet warm. In any case, it was a theory of the ancient magicians that any living being is a storehouse of energy, varying in quantity according to the size and health of the animal, and in quality according to its mental and moral character. At the death of the animal, this energy is liberated suddenly. The animal should therefore be killed within the circle or in the triangle, as the case may be, so that its energy cannot escape. An animal should be selected whose nature accords that with that of the ceremony. Thus, by sacrificing a female lamb, one would not obtain any appreciable quantity of the fierce energy useful to a magician who was invoking Mars. In such a case, a ram would be more suitable, and this ram should be virgin. The whole potential of its original total energy should not have been diminished in any way. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. We're talking about human sacrifices. I have with me in my hand right now a note to me. I will not identify the source. And it's from an individual who was a high priest in the cult in the past. He's now broken away. He's a born-again Christian. Although my experience as a satanic high priest was with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan, who claims they do not believe in or practice the ritual of human sacrifice. I had access to and have seen this ritual outlined in detail in the Real Satanic Bible, codenamed Cloven Hoof. The purpose of the ritual, as stated in this book, is for the sole purpose of the high priest and his covert, or grotto, to intake the power of life into themselves as their life force leaves the body, much like in the series of the Highlander, where the immortal who serves the head of another immortal gathers and takes in that immortal's life force, energizing him. Contrary to the popular belief that this ritual is to pay homage to Satan or to receive favor, this ritual is for self-reasons. The homage ritual is entirely a different one altogether and usually involves a female version, sometimes a chosen member of the group, or an enemy of the group as a victim. The power ritual is usually done with a young child or infant, or it is believed that the life force is greater in those who are termed innocent in nature. In both cases, the sacrificial ritual, a deep incision beginning at the sternum area of the chest, is made with a long blade sacrificial dagger. The cut is then brought downward to the belly button, and a vertical incision is made across the abdomen, intersecting the first cut, forming an upside-down cross. Depending on the denomination of Satanism, there are several. In some cases, some of the internal organs and parts of the victim's body are consumed by the group, as it is believed that immersed sexual powers, strength, and psychic powers can be ordained through this process. As sickening as this may sound, unfortunately, is a reality. Other parts of the victims are worn as charms, or saved to be used in spell casting. Be it understood that the victim is fully conscious and aware as this ritual is being performed. The blood, the greatest source of life and most needed bodily fluid, is consumed by all from a sacrificial chalice. I hope this helps shed some light on the grisly going ones which occur in this world of the occult, as others set by uncomfortable, unaware. A former son of darkness, now a child of the true light, Jesus Christ. That's a living testimonial. Okay, let's talk some more about Aleister Crowley. The law is for all. Now we're talking about sexual abuse here. Moreover, the beast 666 advises that all children shall be accustomed from infancy to witness every type of sexual act, as also the process of birth, lest falsehood fog and mystery stupefy their minds, whose error might thwart and misdirect the growth of their subconscious system of self-symbolism. Well, make shame, shyness, cowardice, and hypocrisy the conditions of success in life. It may therefore be considered improper as a general rule for your sexual gratification to destroy, deform, or displease any other star. Mutual consent to the act is a condition thereof. It must, of course, be understood that such consent is not always explicit. There are cases when seduction or rape may be emancipation or initiation to another. Such acts can only be judged by their results. They're talking about initiation and emancipation. That's how they justify their sexual abuse of the children, by the way. These are the 8 basic holidays. The real holiday for Satanism is the person's birthday. I don't know, you want to copy those down? Why don't you see me afterwards and we'll give them a copy. I'll give you a copy of them so we can keep this rolling. Now, we talked about missing children earlier. Here's your Reader's Digest article. Reader's Digest, missing children, 100,000 children a year. Few known facts are appalling. Thousands are murdered annually. The number of missing children is rising, and no one is keeping an accurate account. Now, I've had a number of interesting cases that I've handled in the past, and one of them is the McMartin case. The McMartin case was a ritual abuse allegations by children at the McMartin Preschool, Manhattan Beach, California. The case broke in 1983. A child came home and told his mother that he'd been abused. Other children came forward. There was some publicity. And the long and short of it is that the kids claimed, among other things, that there were tunnels under the school. They claimed that they were taken down into the tunnels and molested, that they were witnessing human sacrifices in the tunnels and elsewhere. They were taken up into a tunnel of the bathroom of the triplex next door, and there was a trap door in the bathroom, taken out in the automobiles, and prostituted in the community. We're talking about 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old children. These are certain allegations. They also claimed that they were, some of them claimed that they were taken to an airport, obviously nearby Hawthorne Airport, about 10 minutes away, placed in jets and flown to Crestline, which they didn't say Crestline, flown into the mountains, where they were witnesses to sexual abuse and ritual abuse matters. And now, the day that the case went to trial, excuse me, not the day that the case broke, when it was made public, the day after the case was made public, the property at this location burned down. This is an abandoned satanic site in Crestline, California. I called the prosecutor, and I told the prosecutor I may have located the site where the children claim they were taken, and if you like, I'll be glad to take you there, and then the children can identify it. The prosecutor told me she was not interested. But this is a circle right here. There was some writing in the circle. I didn't photograph that. These are some ovens that were on the site. This was built on the side of the mountain, by the way. There were some steel clamps that were on one of these this brick wall, and it appeared that shackles had been attached to them at one time. This is an underground dungeon. I went down here myself. There was a door up above. It wasn't a door. There was concrete above that, and then you had to go into a small opening. It was about 8 by 10. There's satanic writing on the wall, as you can see. And a frightening situation if you knew you were going to be sacrificed, certainly. This is some satanic symbols. Notice the similarity. Can you see that? Oh, it should be the other way around. There you go. I think that does it, doesn't it? Okay. That shows you the outline. Now I'm going to read this upside down. Is that all right? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay, this is Belial. I think you pronounce it that way. A mighty king created next after Lucifer. Appears in the form of a beautiful angel seated in a chariot of fire and speaking with a pleasant voice. He fell first amongst the superior angels who went before Michael and other heavenly angels. He distributes preferences for senatorships, causes favors of friends and foes, and gives excellent familiars. He must have offerings and sacrifices made to him. And we have another one here. See that? Right? See that and the similar there? And this is Asmodee. A strong and powerful king appears with 3 heads. The first like a bull, the second like a man, and the third like a ram. He has a serpent's tail, the webbed feet of goose, and he vomits fire. He rides an infernal dragon, carries lance and pennon, and is the chief of the power of Ammon. He must be invoked bareheaded, or otherwise he will deceive. He gives the ring of virtues, teaches arithmetic, geometry, and other handicrafts, answers all questions, makes men invisible, indicates the places of concealed treasures, and guards them if within the domination of Ammon. Star, 5-pointed star. This is a rock, a large rock that had been broken. And this was a circle. These were rocks with concrete, and it was filled with concrete. I don't know what they used that for. One of their ceremonies, obviously. And this was up just in front of the house that burned down. And you would have, this looks out over the valley. This built right on the side of the mountain. This is all fill, by the way. And this went down, must have gone down 200-300 feet, these rocks in the fill. So it cost them an awful lot of money. Now this is San Bernardino, California. And there's the road that leads up to the mountain. And I drove up on this mountain, on this road, and you can see this enclave on the side of the mountain. That's looking from where the back of the, if I step back out, I'd gone down the mountain, right? That's looking in the other direction. There's my associate Judy, and the house was up in there. Now there's a street in front of the house. You cannot see down over the hill from the street, so it's very safe apparently for them. Oh, how clever! Didn't we have a house, HR 666, right? Now this next case, which I'm going to describe to you and give you details on, is the Lou Bear case. I'll tell you what, before I give you the Lou Bear case, I'll talk a little more. I mentioned the McMartin case. Let me talk some more about that. In 1983, the case broke, as I mentioned. This McMartin School was built in 1966. The children claimed, as I said, that there were tunnels under the school. They were taken into the tunnels. The district attorney went out and looked for tunnels, could not find them. In the spring of 1990, the property was sold from the McMartins to the defense attorney, or given to the defense attorney, Danny Davis, because he said he was broke. He only made $3 million on the case. And it was sold from Danny Davis to a contractor who's decided he wanted to build a building, an office building on there. When we learned, some of the parents and I learned that a contractor had access to the property, we felt we could get access to it. And so we contacted him. I actually signed a contract with him. And we went in. He gave us two weeks to go in and look for tunnels. As I said, the DA had looked for tunnels several years earlier and had not found them. So I hired an archaeologist, Dr. Gary Stickle at UCLA. We began our tunnel dig. The parents were very nice. They went out and got coffee and ham and cheese sandwiches for us, but I wouldn't let them get near any of the evidence. And Dr. Gary Stickle brought in his own team of archaeologists, and all I did was coordinate the project. He actually did the scientific work. We found tunnels, ladies and gentlemen. Here's an idea of what we found. We found a 9-foot wide subterranean entrance went into the west wall of the dog room. The entrance had a live avocado tree on the right, a dead one on the left, which meant that when they opened up the entrance, they had to cut the tree. They cut the tree root. An interesting facet was this. There was a Disney bag, copyright 1982, found 4.5 feet below the classroom floor and 3 to 6 inches in from the entrance and under the foundation of classroom floor. The Disney bag was found right in the mouth of the tunnel where the kids said they went in. Now, the way that the archaeologists were able to say that there were tunnels there that had been filled in is because the dirt that was brought in to fill the tunnels was foreign from the natural soil. And right at this location, this copyright 1982 plastic Disney bag, sandwich bag, was at that precise location where the entrance to the tunnel was. Ken Lanning, the FBI behavioral science expert, quote unquote, out of Quantico, has publicly made the claim, I've been told this, I don't know if he said this or not, that I went out and found this little bag and put it there, placed it there. Not true. The tunnel was actually 30 inches wide, 44 to 46 inches deep, with the top of the tunnel 30 inches under the classroom floor. The footing between classroom 3 and 4 was arched where the tunnel passed underneath and 12 inches shorter in depth at this location than some footing, the same footing 12 feet to the north. This is significant because it would indicate that the tunnels were built at the time that the house, that the school was built. It was part of it because they actually arched the foundation when they put the foundation in. So I think that's very important. And the 9-foot wide chamber was found along the channel under classroom 4. There was a 7-foot tunnel extending into the triplex next door. The children, as I said, claimed they were taken up into a trap door of the bathroom of the triplex and taken out into the community. There was a crawl space of about 18 to 20 inches. We got one of our thinner and skinnier members to go in there with the camera, and the bathtub actually protruded below the surface of the floor, and you could see where the floor had been sawed out. So there was definitely a trap door there of some sort. Other significant facts: a small white plastic plate with 3 pentagrams hand-drawn on the top of the green paint was found. I've got copies of that. I'll show you that in just a minute. Many other artifacts were found. There were no doorknobs on classroom 3, only a deadbolt lock. Each classroom had an on and off light switch labeled fire alarm. System did not connect to a fire station but was used as an alert within the school. In other words, if somebody came around, somebody could push the alarm and it would notify either somebody in the office or somebody else, wherever they were, that there was intruders or strangers in the area. There are more than 2,000 artifacts were found under the school floor, including over 100 animal bones. It was kind of an interesting story because we were given 2 weeks to get off the property. The man wanted to build an office building there, and I was able to stall him for 34 days. And I couldn't get the archaeologist to say, come on, there's tunnels there, Gary. You know there's tunnels there. He said, no, I want to make sure, I want to make sure. Well, after all, I don't blame him. But the contractor told me, look, I don't care if you find tunnels or not. Tomorrow at noon, we're bringing the bulldozers up there, and we're going to level that building. And you better not be in it because you'll go down with the building. So the morning of the 34th day, Dr. Gary Stickle finally said, okay, I will admit that I think there's tunnels here. There were tunnels here at one time that had been filled in. And we literally walked out of there, had a press conference and walked out of there as the bulldozers came in and tore it down. Before the bulldozers came in and tore it down, we called the district attorney's office. Okay, this was in the middle of the second trial. The first trial, Virginia McMartin had been acquitted. Ray Buckey, the son, was hung jury. The second trial was in process right at that time. They sent an investigator out, Perez is his name, and he got out of the car. I greeted him. He said, look, I don't want to talk to you. I said, this is like the Democratic rally I was at in Galveston, right? Nobody wants to talk to me. I said, why don't you want to talk to me? He says, I don't want to talk to you because all you'll do is argue with me. I said, okay, I'll just keep my mouth shut. You come in and talk to the archaeologist. So I took him in to talk to the archaeologist, and he argued with the archaeologist. He said, there's no tunnels there. And here you can imagine somebody like an investigator arguing with an expert witness who has a doctor's degree in archaeology. Anyway, we prevailed. As far as I'm concerned, we have the documentation. They didn't use the information in the trial. Now, what did these kids say? Well, they identified professional football players. They identified professional baseball players. They identified some actors. They identified the son of one of the most prominent politicians in Los Angeles. Well, you know, no wonder, huh? How about that? Now, there is where the tunnel entrance was, right there. The kid said there were rabbit cages there. And I'll show you more about that in a minute. The tunnel, we documented the tunnel went like this. There was a chamber there. It went across here. Here's where the arch was, right there. We theorized that the tunnel went here. We didn't have time to dig for that. And there's over into the property next door. This is the triplex. This is about where the trap door in the bathroom was. Here's a live avocado tree. Now keep this in mind because I'm going to show you some pictures in a minute. Live avocado tree. This was a play area right in here. We actually slept up there. We had control of that property for 24 hours for 34 straight days. Slept up there in the dirt. Now this is the entrance. There's the live avocado tree root. The avocado tree was over in here. The dead root was over here, which would indicate that they had to cut it, right, like this. Live, dead. That's the child's plate that we found in the sandbox. It was buried about 6 inches under. We really did a job on this, on the property. There's the, excuse me, there's the arch. There's the tunnel went from, this is classroom 4 over there. On the other side of the arch is classroom 3. Notice it's arched, just as I said. There's yours truly, looking up from down below. We actually brought in concrete cutters to cut that floor up. And we did a job on it. I graduated at the University of Nebraska, so I wore my Nebraska baseball hat for good luck. You see it there. For all you KU fans, K-State fans, Missouri fans. This town's full of them. I might just show you, I have a number of symbols here. This is the horned hand, sign of recognition between those who are in the occult. May also innocently be used by those who identify with heavy metal music. That was at the inauguration, when he was inaugurated. He was, I've seen the video of it. He was waving like this to the crowd. At the last minute, he went down and went like this for a second. Okay, that tells you a little bit about cults and satanic cults and preschools. By the way, Dr. Roland Summit, psychiatrist at UCLA, has told me that he's also involved in these issues, that he has intelligence information and otherwise, that there are more than 50 preschools around the country where they claim that there's been sexual ritual abuse, and tunnels are located under the schools, more than 50 of them. The McMartin family traveled all over the world because they were experts in putting preschools together, organizing them, showing them how to build the schools and so forth. There were more than 5,500 children went through this McMartin school from the time it was built in 1966 until 1983, when this incident was alleged to have taken place. The cults use these 2-, 3-, and 4-year-old children for several purposes. Number one, they use them for pornographic films. There's a lot of money, $10 billion a year, pornographic business in this country. They use them in their initiation. They consider them initiated into the cult, even though their parents don't know about it. And they use them as part of their ceremonies. In other words, they need children in certain ceremonies. Now, I've been told, well, now don't tell me the kids, if they witnessed a human sacrifice or the sacrifice of a baby, that they wouldn't go home and tell their parents about it. But I'll tell you what a little girl in the McMartin case told me. And she told her mother, and her mother told me. She told her mother that she witnessed these sacrifices, and that on one occasion, after her mother dropped her off in the morning and before the mother picked her up at night, she was taken to her bedroom, back to her home. They went into the house. They sexually molested her in the home, in the bedroom. They left a little token there. They took her little baby kitten, took the kitten into the school, and had a ceremony and sacrificed the kitten in front of her. Then they told the little girl, they said, if you talk to your mother or your father, we're going to do this to your mother, your father, and your little brother. Now, don't tell me that a kid's going to talk under those conditions. They're petrified. They also talked about men coming in and sexually molesting them dressed in police uniforms, dressed as Santa Claus, and so forth. So now I'd like to discuss the Lou Bear case with you. This is a case out of Philadelphia. I've worked a number of these cases, by the way, and I can't begin to give them all to you because I think we'd be here all night. But this is a case where the father was divorced from the mother, and the children would come visit him, and he noticed signs of satanic ritual abuse with the kids, just from their actions and their talking and some of the things that they were doing. And there are certain signs, by the way, but we don't need to present them here. Again, we don't have time. So he went to the courts and tried to get relief from the courts, tried to get the kids taken away from the mother. And he did not receive any satisfaction there. So Lou Bear grabbed his kids one day when they were visiting with him and disappeared, went into the underground down in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, the FBI, in my day, we were involved in kidnapping, extortion, bank robberies, skyjackings, as I said earlier. Well, now they're involved in domestic cases. And they go out and look for these children, and they go out and look for these parents. And they came down and arrested Lou Bear, and they took the children away from him. The last time I talked to Lou, he had not seen his children in 4 years. But in an attempt to have his children come see him for visitation, he went back into court with these allegations. And the evidence he had some medical evidence, but also the 5-, 6-year-old child had drawn some pictures that were unsolicited by him or by anybody else. And so as an expert, so-called expert on Satanism, I was asked to examine these pictures and give my opinion on it. I flew to Philadelphia, examined the pictures, and concluded that I felt the children had been exposed to some sort of or degree of satanic activity. And these are the pictures. Now, when I was this age, I was drawing airplanes and cars, and my little female friends were drawing flowers and other things of that nature. And in this particular instance, this is a picture that he drew of a man on an altar. Notice the blood and so forth. By the way, children who have been sexually abused will oftentimes draw the genitals, whereas if they've never been abused and they draw a nude body, they never draw the genitals. Now, this is, again, a picture unsolicited. People, fire, throws a baby in the fire. This is apparently an altar. Bone, liver, blood, kitty. Matt Bear is the kid's name, drawn August 24th, '89. Again, this is obviously a ritual outside, outdoors, table, fire, people, devil, crossed out. Again, the ritual, knife. People have no cloth on, he says. Oftentimes they're in the nude, oftentimes they wear robes and they're nude underneath the robes. This is the most revealing of all. I mentioned earlier about the goat head. This would indicate that the child was exposed to a higher degree of satanic activity than the normal. These are 3 to 6 inches, 3 to 6 feet tall, made out of wood. Oftentimes, it's a goat head on the top. That's what I would have used in my testimony. By the way, I made a second trip back to the courts, and when they had a hearing, and the judge wouldn't even let me in the courtroom. I sat outside on a bench all day long. Here's the article on the McMartin Tunnel. McMartin digs suspended, no evidence of secret tunnels. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. We've got 3 minutes, and I'm going to just answer as many questions as I can. How was the fire started at Waco? I don't know. I was told that the fire was started by the tanks coming in and using gas. Again, I don't have documentation on that. Please explain the $1 billion per day to Russia. Why $1 billion and why to Russia? I don't know. I've got to talk to an economist about that. I just learned that in the last few days. Why are they postponing or delaying the trials of McVeigh and Nichols in Colorado? I don't know that one either. I'm not doing so well, am I, on these questions? You'll have to ask the judge that. Do you have any updates on Anton LaVey? Whereabouts, condition? The last I heard, he was in the Bay Area. I've been on some TV shows with his daughter, Zin LeVay. What was White Rose, Black Rose? That was a drug operation that I explained earlier. What's your opinion on Nixon and Eisenhower? I don't think I have enough time to give that one. Tell us more about the concentration camps. They are being built on the military bases. There's no question about it. I have documentation about this. How do you feel about the national curfew? I don't trust anything that Bill Clinton says about national curfew or anything else. I think it's a facade to try to get votes. And also, how about the child they're talking about adopting? I want to have a bumper sticker out. I'm going to say, Bill, is it one of yours? Are you afraid of being eliminated like Kennedy or speaking out? Well, no, not really. I've been very fortunate. There have been attempts on my life. I've had situations where I had tight security problems, and I've made it so far, and I feel that God is watching over me. And that is all I can tell you right now. Time has just run out. Thank you very much.
We really appreciate that, Ted. He has given us a lot of good information, and I appreciate you enduring 4 hours. Now, as we look at all of this, we have to ask ourselves, what is the real answer to all of this? If you see that it's an anti-government talk, then you miss the point. All of these things are prophesied. As we get close to the end, we see things start falling apart, and of course they are. So then we say, well, how do we prepare? There are those that would tell you that what you need to do is to dig a hole in the side of the mountain and pull the entrance in behind you. There are those that tell you that perhaps guns, groceries, and fallout shelters is the right answer and to resist the government. And folks, I don't think that's the right answer. The kind of protection that I want to have is found in Psalms 91, where it says, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust." A few verses down it says, "Though 1,000 fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, it will not come nigh thee. For only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked." Now, a lot of folks would want to say that they're going to count on the rapture to save us. And I personally do. From my studies in the Bible, it appears to be a pre-trib rapture. But the problem is we can't exactly count on that to save us from trouble. Matter of fact, I recently asked a group of people how many people thought that they would probably see a lot of trouble before the rapture takes place. And I think most people would agree that we're going to see some hard times. The thing that we can count on is not the rapture. We don't know when it's going to happen. We really don't. But what we can count on is Jesus. And I don't know about you, but if I'm in that lion's den, I want Jesus there. And if I'm in that flame of furnace with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, everything is going to be okay if Jesus is there. So how do we get him to walk with us? How do we get Jesus to protect us? He only protects those that are clean, without spot, without wrinkle. So how do we get those wrinkles washed away? Good question. Also, how do we get our name written in the book of life so we get to go to heaven? Another good question. The answer is, first thing we have to realize is that we're all a sinner. Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God." Next thing we have to realize, we can't earn it. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, "For it is by grace you are saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is a gift from God, not of works, lest any man should boast." Okay, if this eternal salvation is a gift, and getting our sins washed away is a simple gift, then how do we reach out and take that gift? Romans 10:9 and 10 gives the answer. It says, "If thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God has raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For the heart man believeth unto righteousness, but with the mouth confession is made unto salvation." In other words, it's not enough to believe it, not say it. It's not enough to say it and not believe it. We've got to believe and got to say it. Also, Acts 2:38 says, "Repent, be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins, and ye shall receive the gift of the Holy Spirit." Oh, repent? This is America. We don't hear people talk about that anymore. What is repent? One day in my life, I sat down and made a decision that I was going to get back right with God. And I made him a promise. I made him a covenant. And I said, God, if you'll forgive my sins, if you'll give me another chance, if you'll let me start doing it right again, if you'll wash me clean, from here on out, I promise I'm yours. That's repenting. Now, Holy Spirit, I ask you to go out and knock on the people's heart, both in the audience and also on video, those people whose names you'd like to write in the book of life. Those people you'd like to wash clean of their sins, that they would make that decision to do so right now. In Jesus' name. Let's all bow our head. No one looking around. Yes, you may have prayed the prayer before. It still sounds good and feels good to say it again. Let's all say it together. Dear Heavenly Father, I admit I'm a sinner, and I confess with my mouth, and I believe in my heart that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, died on the cross, arose 3 days later, sits at the right hand of the Father. I ask him to wash my sins away, write my name in the book of life, keep me holy, and save me in the day of trouble. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, folks, I'd like to say it's all over. It's just that simple, but it's not. Matthew 7:21 says, not everyone that cries, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but those that doeth the will of the Father. So we have to follow on to follow his laws. It's not over in another way, because Matthew 10:32-3 says, whosoever confesses me before men, him will I also confess before my Father which is in heaven. But whosoever denies me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven. He's only saying he wants Christians to have a little steel in their backbone for a change and stand up and be counted and say, yes, Jesus is Lord. And that's the only reason I ask you to do this. I'm not going to ask you to come forward. I have one simple question. If you just prayed that prayer for the very first time and you really meant business with God, would you raise your hand? Okay. I see you. All right, if you prayed that prayer rededicating your life, saying from here on out, I'm yours, would you raise your hand? Okay. All right. Now, if you prayed that prayer and you raised your hand in either group, would you please stand? I'm not going to embarrass you. Just stand. Okay, and I have one question for each of you, and that question is, who's your Lord and Savior?